in this episode, I get to do a little bit of hero worship. Hey, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Welcome back to the Sea and Land Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Sahno. This podcast is brought to you by Sea and Land Fitness. We just got some new hats in, a little bit of red. We got navy blue. We got a bunch of other stuff. Head on over to the website, www.sandlfit, that's sandlfit.com. and check it out. All right. As you probably noticed from the intro, I'm going to be super excited about doing this episode. So I have the absolute honor and pleasure of having Jeff Gurwitch on this podcast. Jeff is retired from the United States Army Special Forces. That's the Green Berets, guys. And he retired as an 18 Zulu, a team sergeant. He did 9 combat deployments, starting with the 1991 First Gulf War, and then 3 tours in Iraq and 3 tours in Afghanistan during the Global War on Terror. Taught as the lead combat marksmanship instructor at the SFARDEC, which is this enormous acronym, which basically is the Special Forces Advanced Reconnaissance, Target Analysis, Breathe, and Exploitation Techniques course. It's an advanced CQB course. He has been a contributing writer for DefenseReview.com, SWAT Magazine, American Cop, and is also the owner and primary instructor at Modern Tactical Shooting in North Carolina. Breathe again. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. That was, did you notice my eye line was down because it's such a long paragraph? You have a storied career, sir.
I would say for my era, in Special Forces, I'm probably average with a lot of the other SF guys who served, in the heart of the War on Terror.
Oh my gosh.
My career is probably average.
Well, I want to talk about that real quick in the beginning before we get into the questions and the meat of what this episode's about. So when I was a kid, so my uncle was in the Vietnam War. My other uncle was in the Vietnam War. They were both in the Army. My dad, he did 3 tours in Vietnam as he was a bosun's mate. So, but he was in the Brown Water Navy from like Apocalypse Now. Yeah. He went back.
Guys, yeah.
He went back. My dad's hilarious. He's this little Polish guy who, like, I'm 6'2", terrified of the guy growing up. So when I was younger, I don't even think I was 10 years old yet. There was this box in the attic of one of my uncle's homes, and it was National Geographic's. And there was a 1963 1963 edition of National Geographic, and it was on the Special Forces in Vietnam. This was before the war had really taken off and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw what you guys did, and I have been enamored by it ever since. These guys had nothing. They were on their own, literally on their own, not even behind enemy lines. They were just in an entirely alien, hostile environment. And that's your life. Wow. Welcome to the show. That's where the hero worship is coming from.
Well, yeah, you're making me feel uncomfortable.
I'm sorry.
Hero worship. I would say I'm the average SF guy.
All right. Well, you also have a show, Modern Tactical Shooting, on YouTube, and you said a couple of things in one of the ones that I watched where they thought you were a dentist. You went to the
Yeah, it's true. It's a totally true story. The first look, people think I'm a dentist or something. Yes.
Well, I am here to tell you that you fit the bill because everything that I've ever learned about special forces is that you are teachers. You guys are educators. You guys go behind enemy lines and you take doctrine, data, information. You have individuals who know everything about medicine, know everything about engines, know everything about radios, know everything about every weapon system on the planet, and you're able to go in and go, oh yeah, I could fix that. And it's just your depth and detail in the stories that you tell on your YouTube channel are fascinating, and you are the consummate educator. Please continue to do what you're doing.
Thank you.
Of course. All right. So the reason I've brought you on the show has nothing to do with modern tactical shooting, but actually
Yep.
will have to do with modern tactical shooting. Um, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos on how to pass special forces selection, how to pass buds, but there are almost, I haven't found any videos on, okay, now you've done it. What are the standards? What do you do in day-to-day life? What's life in garrison? For those of you who don't know, that's in the rear when you're not out in the field, either training or doing missions. And that's why I've brought you here today. And I'll just jump right into the questions if that's okay.
Yep. Sure.
So as I said, many have seen the numerous videos for Buds, Ranger School, Ranger Battalion. Now, with that operational tempo in mind, what is the structure within these commands for maintenance of these physical requirements and needs once these guys arrive at the units? And is it left to the individual service men to maintain the standard on their own? And also, what are the repercussions for not maintaining the standards? And is there any support for those who are lagging?
So I'll speak in the context of special forces because Rangers is different, SEALs is different.
Okay.
We all have high physical requirements. But when it comes to sustaining and maintaining, it's at the team level. So it's at that team sergeant, that team leader. They're going to define the standards for whatever their mission set they're training for. Now, we have to meet Army standards. We have to meet the basic Army PT tests, but
Okay.
that's considered basic level. Within the team itself, they're going to have their own standards. During my time, I measured physical fitness off of a PT test called the UBRR, the Upper Body Round Robin. It was created at Tier 1 units, and I use that just because it's a
Wow.
multi-event PT test. I use that as a gauge.
Okay.
So that's where the standards are. It's really set still at the team level.
What is that?
So,
I apologize for interrupting. What is
yes.
that test?
So the upper body round robin is I was going to write it down.
It's
It's
okay.
multiple events. It's a bench press. It's push ups. It's pull ups. It's sit ups. It's a thing called kip ups.
Mm-hmm.
You have a shuttle run. You have a rock march or a 5 mile run, and you have a rope climb in full kit. That's pass or fail. And I like it because it's a very balanced test. So I'm a strong runner. I'm a pretty slender guy. So
Mm-hmm.
where I might be weak on the bench press, I can make up, and you're going for points. I can make it up for the run. So vice versa, if some dudes are jacked and they're built like Mr. Olympia and they're not strong runners, well, they can make it up in the strength exercises. So
Oh
I think it's
wow.
a lot better balance.
Okay. So is that so? You brought up something that's really interesting. So the multitude of different performance standards that exist inner service and within service. So you have the Air Force,
Yes.
Navy, the Marine Corps, they've all got their own. The Army's got its own, and that changes which way's the wind blowing. They're probably going to come out with a new fitness test in the Army soon. That's been the word. And then, from what I understand, the Joint Special Operations Command has a fitness standard test. Am I incorrect on that?
no. That's we help each special operations unit, Rangers, Navy SEALs, SF. We all have our own individual standards.
Okay. So,
So, like Navy SEALs, they're famous for their buds.
mhm.
We have our, of course, we have our selection. We have a team week in there. That's kind of like our gold standard to get in. But once you're in, it's up to your team, your Special Forces ODA, and you have to align it with whatever your mission set you're looking for, and that's where there's a lot of confusion coming in. It depends. For, I'll say, Afghanistan, if you get the commando mission where the priority is to lead Afghans on the ground, that's a high physical requirement because you could be humping the mountains of Afghanistan. Whereas opposed if you're on a team where your primary role is to do, say, surveillance type stuff, that's more low level. Having high physical fitness is not a priority. Having hard and soft skills is a priority. So it really, a good team will balance their physical fitness to match the mission.
So that's interesting because in my domain, I just got my master's in August from the University of Florida in applied physiology and kinesiology, and we stratify it by strength, power, hypertrophy, which is the increase in muscle size, and muscular endurance. So I'm assuming, let's take the commando mission in Afghanistan. That's going to be high in muscular endurance, a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of, long, slow drudging. Okay, that's going to require strength, of course. All of these require strength, but the Afghanistan mission is going to require a lot of muscular endurance, which is, you have the running background, which you were able to excel at. So I'm not going to say Afghanistan was easy physically for you, but you're going to have some guys who are really, oh my gosh, when does this mountain ever end? Whereas you were like able to maybe suck it up a little bit more. Am I incorrect on that?
Well, I my last tour was 2015. I was a team sergeant at 45 years old, trying to keep up with 20 somethings. And I wanted to say this. I've been looking forward to it. And the team guys I served with know the ridge lines and mountains of Aruzgan in Afghanistan almost broke me. It was the
Oh
hardest
man.
multi-day mission I've ever done. A normal combat load is about 65 pounds, and that's body armor and a small day pack. And to do a multi-day op like that, it was the hardest, most physical stuff I've had to do. So
Wow.
yeah, it was something else.
Now, but you did it. You did it. So pat yourself on the back. give
I
yourself
made
give
it.
yourself a little participation trophy, and you did it. Way to go. So then counter that with Svartek. So it's interesting because I took a course called um, tactical strength and conditioning, and we learned about police officers, fire, military, and the different requirements. And what's interesting is if I think about Svartek, I was in the infantry. We did mount training, which is mobile operations, urban
Yep.
terrain. I'm
They
explaining
just have
this
a
not for
fancier
you.
name.
Yeah, I'm explaining it for anyone who's watching. Um, and that requires a lot of power. Power is moving heavy loads quickly, moving heavy loads from point A to point B in the shortest period of time. And I imagine, I know what ours was like, but from what I understand, I watched another video where somebody described it, and it's a meat grinder. Svartic is a real, like, go, go, go nonstop. Am I somewhere
It's
close
a
on that?
different. It's well, I would say it's different. So Afghanistan, you need long range endurance because you're going to go
Okay.
on multi-day ops with no break. Whereas, say, operating in an urban environment, it's very short bursts of an intense energy. So when you've got to, hustle from one building to another, go up and down stairs, short extreme bursts,
Get
flooding into rooms
getting out
with
of
tactics.
vehicles and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and everything's at a rapid pace. So yeah, short extreme bursts as opposed to say a long endurance, like a sprint versus a marathon.
So when you were in Afghanistan, you were with a lot of new guys, individuals who had just gotten out of the Q course, I'm assuming.
Yep,
Oh,
I half my team was veterans, my last tour, and half the team was brand new guys, fresh out of the course.
and I remember from your combat mindset video that these guys really just rose to the challenge. So bravo Zulu on that. Um, now what from a fitness perspective, I can understand from a combat perspective, it was an eye-opening experience for them. But from a fitness perspective, and I'm actually wondering if they even mentioned it. You know, you want to be the tough guy, you want to show that you can do it. But you being an experienced leader, an experienced NCO, what did you notice that they struggled with, or wasn't something that they might have been prepared for?
Well, one is they've got youth on their side.
Mm-hmm.
I joined SF. The average age was 32 when I joined SF, and so I was a young guy coming to the team at 27. Now, fast forward, the average age has dropped almost 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So, I was in my mid 40s. The new guys in the team are coming in. They're 22, 23, and 24-year olds, and they come in with great physical fitness. Not only do they have to pass selection, there's a lot of prep programs they have. So they do a great job of getting these guys super fit when they come to a team. So that's not the issue. I think the hardest thing they have to adjust is probably civilian physical fitness, where you really can take time to have a proper diet, to really work out properly, really and have all the benefits of all, the best there has to offer in gyms.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas once you deploy, you don't have a good diet depending on where you're working out of. The gym equipment is going to be very sparse in some areas. And of course, you're a lot more prone to injury because you're doing all this extreme stuff. Whereas before, when you're working out in a safer civilian environment, you can avoid all these injuries. So I think that's the only transition. I didn't see a lack of stamina in the young guys, and they came
Mm-hmm.
with that.
Okay. So that you brought up something that's really interesting to me, because that is sort of the focus of one of my research projects when I was in my master's program, and that is injuries, uh non-combat related injuries. So there was a huge study that was done on buds. It was done on buds, and it was done, I think it was Ranger School, and they were looking at the high incidence of stress fractures. And
Hmm.
that was stress fractures. I don't know if you know this. They come from, it's an overuse injury. I didn't know that. Um, what are some of the type of overuse injuries, or do you guys really see many injuries because of the training program?
The most lethal thing to a Green Beret in the gym is box jumps on homemade
Oh,
crappy wooden boxes with sharp edges. And guys doing box jumps in Afghanistan, I've seen more guys injured doing those than any other thing in combatives. You think you might get injuries. We joke about it, but yeah, more guys doing CrossFit in our homemade gyms in Afghanistan getting hurt. But when it comes to say stress fractures and repetitive injuries, I joined the army in the 90s. It was a different era for working out. I was in combat arms. You put on a rucksack and you march,
oh
and
my
you
gosh, yeah.
put miles on your back with a rucksack. Luckily, in the last 15 years, the knowledge of how to train athletes in like the colleges and things like that have come over to the military, and we're able to train a lot smarter. And those injuries are not that prevalent in SF. We get criticized all the time because we wear low top hiking shoes. We wear our own hiking shoes out there. Like, what, aren't you guys worried about ankle injuries? I never saw it. Three tours. I'm sure
Wow.
there's some SF guys that twisted their ankle, but as a whole, I didn't see ankle injuries. Everybody wears low top shoes. The Army loves high top boots because they minimize the ankle injuries. I didn't see it.
Okay. So it's funny that you talk about that, and you talk about the rucksack, because so I was in the Navy for 6 years on submarines, and then I was in the Army after September 11th. I was in the infantry. I was in the National Guard, first the 105th Infantry, and then the 69th when we deployed. And I had, avid hiker. I did a bunch of hiking. I grew up in Boy Scouts and all that stuff. So they were always like, "Squid, how can you do all this humping with that rucksack?" And it's because there was a guy in the unit who was an old Vietnam Green Beret. And he said, all right, this is what you're going to do. You're going to call this guy. It's a guy called Tactical Taylor. And you're going to get these rucksack straps. And did you guys use those, the big padded rucksack straps?
I have my original rucksack that I wore in selection still, and it has all that extra padding built into it.
Oh my gosh, that and the cummerbund. And because you would literally get bite and have to go
Yeah.
to the medic and say, dude, I think I have cuts on my shoulders from this. It was insane.
Now, I will say this: I'm a total anti-rucksack marching person for physical fitness.
Okay.
So I joined in the era where that's all you did was ruck march,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of guys in my age all have bad knees and backs. Carrying 50, 60, 70 pounds on your back for miles on end is a great way to destroy your body if you're doing it every week. My last 10 years of my career, I didn't advocate it. And when it came to endurance work, you're going to live and fight in body armor and kit. And instead of doing rucksack march, we would do a full kit run. Shorter
Oh wow.
distance, that short burst of high energy.
Mm-hmm.
Why were you need to build up some endurance in your back and things like that. But that's part of the transition of being able to work out smarter. We're not fighting in rucksacks. Rucksacks is like an admin thing. You're going to have a day pack at the most, but we live and fight out of what body armor and kit. So that was one of my focuses in training for missions.
Mm-hmm.
What are we really wearing on mission? I'm not just going to put it on 60, 70 pounds and walk 20 miles. Why? We're not doing that in combat.
So that's interesting because a bunch of your videos, I think there was a SCAR video where you talked about how you were integral to the assessment of the SCAR for special forces. And also
Mm-hmm.
being a senior NCO, that kind of translates into changes in training. So you said after the last 10 years, you stepped away from rucksacks and moved over towards body armor and short burst iterations. Have you had the input you had in the weapons side? Have you also seen your input integrated into the fitness side, the operational
Well,
side?
I'm from a different era. And again, I was a 45-year-old serving on a team with 20 and 30-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
The transition had already happened, sort of, and I was playing catch up.
Oh, all right.
So, we have a lot of programs. I wanted to bring up a program we have called Thor 3,
Okay.
which was established around 2010.
I'm writing a bunch of
And it,
these things down. I'm writing all these
okay,
things down. So go on.
yeah. So there's this program called Thor 3 established about 2010, and SOCOM got super smart. They're like, hey, how do universities maintain all these athletes?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they have coaching staff, they have physical therapists, they have workout coaches. Whereas in the Army, they're like, hey, we're just your NCO's in charge. Well, is your NCO an expert on proper strength training?
Mm-hmm.
So they bring in professionals, and we have these training teams at each group where it's civilian professional trainers at college athletic level,
Wow.
strength conditioning coaches, physical therapists. So you can have them write up a training program for your team and have it tailored to your mission. So, for example, getting ready for Afghanistan, I go to the facility and I could say, listen, I've got 3 months to train my guys up. We're expecting to have to do this type of stuff. Can you get us ready? And they'll make a program and they'll coach you through it.
Wow.
And they also do rehabilitation for wounded warriors.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wonder if you've ever seen, and there's SF guys out there who are missing a leg, whether it's above the knee or below the knee, and they're serving on an ODA, how'd these guys get back to the team? They developed a
Awesome.
special physical fitness test for wounded warriors that if they pass, they're deemed operationally ready again. And I took the Wounded Warrior PT test when it was in the pilot program. They wanted, guys with all limbs to try and do it. And it was hellacious.
Oh my
And if you could
gosh.
pass that missing a leg, then you were definitely team ready. So this Thor 3 program, it's been around since about 2010, and I think the regular Army is adopting a similar model now with these strength coaches coming in and helping out soldiers. It's a phenomenal tool that teams can use.
Well, that's pretty cool because I remember I told you I came back in 2001. back into the military in 2001. And right around the end of 2002, 2003, the Army was pushing this. Do you remember the warrior fitness thing that they were trying to
Well,
push?
I was in regular army, so
No,
we're
I'm
sheltered from
sorry.
regular army. Yeah. I don't know much about it. I saw it being developed, like the current regular army physical fitness test, which is supposed to prepare you for combat. I think it's a giant boondoggle. That's why I preferred the UBRR,
Hmm.
which a lot of SF teams, at least up until the time I retired in 2017, had chosen to be their team model for
Hmm.
let's say let's have a test. Well, I think what a lot of people or a lot of military people, even leadership, forget is originally, this goes, I'm going off on a tangent here.
It's okay.
The original reason for like the original Army PT test was just to show a minimum, like a minimum capability when it was developed in the 60s and 70s. And then in the 80s and 90s, well, now it became this thing. If you score a 300, you're the optimum example. Really, that's just a minimum. That's just to show that you can do something. Uh, Combat arms, and I grew up in the infantry first, 7 years in the infantry. Yes, we did the Army PT test, but still within our units. I mean, this is regular Army. We still had our own standards. Hey, look, we
Hmm.
had a pull-up standard. We had, hey, if you want to really be tough, we had a different push-up standard. So I think the Army trying to make these, PT tests require all this specialized equipment and this and that. Instead of training for the fight, everybody starts training to what? Just pass a
Yeah,
PT
just
test.
past the
And then they
PT test.
completely miss the mark.
So now you've got this Thor 3, and that's great. You're all prepared to hit the ground running. Um
Yep.
is the mission itself enough of a fitness maintainer? Yeah, there you
No.
go.
Yeah. No, not at all.
So what do you do in country?
Well, either you'll 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 either end up at a facility that has a pretty decent gym,
Hmm.
or SF guys, we'll create it. We'll build gyms. In the early days of Iraq and Afghanistan, you wanted a gym, you source it, you fund it, and you build it downrange. You can have caveman style gyms where you're lifting rocks and boulders, or you might get some funding and be able to build a decent gym at your team house. Or you'll end up at a forward operating base with a fantastic gym that's
Oh
been
wow.
pretty well established. So it's just pot luck what you're going to get.
What's the most creative you've seen in all of your combat tours?
I've seen the straight up caveman style, like rocks and logs drilled in, and that's pretty creative. I'm not a weightlifter guy.
No, it's okay.
So, yeah, so I'm never drawn to the gym. I did enough weightlifting so I wouldn't be weak. Uh, but yeah, that and I don't, but I've seen teams go crazy. I've seen rock climbing walls at team houses,
Wow.
downrange, things like that. Skate parks built. It's just whatever
Jeez.
guys are into.
Holy
Yeah.
cow. All right, so we've covered the fitness aspect of it, but fitness is fueled by nutrition. Um,
Yes.
MREs are meals ready to eat. For those of you who don't know, MREs are, anyone can say what they. I like the chip beef one, by the way. Um, I liked it. People were always giving that one away. I'll take it. Um, they are high in calories for a very specific purpose. I think there's something like 5,000 calories per box or something like that, which is ridiculous. Um, did you guys primarily fuel off of MREs? Did you guys?
Nope.
No. All right, there you go.
One of the reasons one of the reasons I went special forces is to avoid eating MREs. So the only time you're eating MREs is when you're outside the wire, actually on a mission.
Hmm.
Again, special forces teams are still designed, like you mentioned in the beginning, to be dropped into Vietnam and you self-sustain. That's it. Special forces teams are still set up like that to
Hmm.
be dropped in an area with minimal outside support, meaning you want food? Fine. Here's funding, hire a cook, buy your own supplies, uh, make your own kitchen. They're designed that way to live without support. So guys aren't sitting there at fobs and eating MREs in the rear or on their at their team location. It's only on mission. So at your team location, depending on how creative and how many resources you have, you can either eat really good or maybe eat mediocre.
What about eating uh indigenous? Does that ever happen with you guys?
Well, yeah, especially in a lot of non-combat deployments, because
Hmm.
SF is all over the world at any one time. And a lot of places you'll go in and you're going to hire a local cook and you'll give them a contract. Hey, feed this many guys for the next 2 months. So you're going to eat local food because that's all they know.
Okay.
And one thing I wanted to really bring up here is one of I think the biggest misconception when it comes to special forces, we need cockroaches. We need guys that can survive on crappy food and still have a high performance level. So if the only one danger I'd say with the new guys coming into the regiment, if they're used to say eating fantastic and watching their calories and having these balanced protein meals, you're going to lose that on deployments. So you got to be able to last without the best of the best, without your creatine powder and all that stuff. You need guys who are cockroaches who can just eat anything if they have to and still be able to perform.
Well, because that's one of the stories that I heard in another podcast, where they were talking about they wound up going to Iraq, and the team house, not the team, I think it was the Navy SEALs. They had like cases of protein powder and Cliff bars and just like
So
all
there, I don't know if it still exists. During the middle of Iraq is where we really employed it. SOCOM, views us as high performance
mhm.
athletes, so we get supplemented on top of whatever the regular army decides that it needs to provide for nutrition, which include a budget for supplements, energy drinks,
Wow.
protein bars. That's actually supported downrange. I don't know if the program still exists, but yeah, uh, a funny thing is, I like Starbucks, their cold drinks, their double shots.
Yep.
Well, that's considered an energy drink, and SF would pay for cases of Starbucks double shots when I was in Iraq because, hey, you need it to be high performance.
That is awesome. That is so
Yeah,
great. Now, since they do take that focus, do they give you guys an education on nutrition, on performance nutrition?
that's one of the things that this Thor 3 provides.
Okay.
One of the things they have a nutritionist there. And
Wow.
again, it's tools. If the team wants to explore it, it's still down to the team and that team leadership. So I'm basing it mainly off my experience. Hey, if the special forces is going to go ahead and hire experts, why don't I utilize that? So it's just an asset that if team guys want to explore, but it's there now. It's there. It's outstanding program, and it's just another tool guys can use because when you look at a normal dining hall, that's still under regular army standards, and they have their own supposed program to keep soldiers with a balanced diet. Yeah, okay. But yeah, really high performance, you need more than that.
Okay, definitely. All right, so I want to finish up by talking about mindset, and I want to read this question because it's a little long-winded. So
Okay.
so there is obviously a relationship between the physical standards of special operations forces and their ability to maintain focus, overcome physical discomfort, and to perform at the level required for the complex missions that you guys are given. So, with this in mind, how do you guys develop a mindset that helps to achieve success? Is it part of the program and culture? Do you select individuals who have this mindset? And is it something that, so it's interesting? You spoke in the last video I watched about you with combat mindset about task saturation, which is
Hmm.
phenomenal, and a subject we could give an entire episode to. When you find individuals who have gone through training, everything's fine, hunky dory, they are getting the best marks, but then you guys realize in leadership that task saturation is a problem for an individual. Do they get filed out, so to speak?
It depends on the context. Task saturation in training, if they can't handle it, then yeah, there's mechanisms that, okay, this guy is not the best performance on a team. We'll send him to a B team or maybe staff time. or maybe to another team to see if he's just not jiving to try and correct him. Task saturation in combat, that's you can't hold it against somebody
Hmm.
unless because again everybody I think probably has some breaking point. And this talks about like the stress within a firefight. And yes, in my mindset video, I talk about times where I witnessed guys just right there on the edge start to break down. You can't hold them against it because we're all trying to train for the unknown.
Hmm.
I had the benefit of having served in combat before, and I had, my last tour, I already had 20 years experience. So you can't totally hold it against, say, a 22, 23-year old coming through a team. I can't view his experience through my prism of what I've seen. So you got to give him some leeway. And you just hope when you're out on mission that you can ease guys into the situation and build that up. But in the case of that video, yeah, we were in one hellacious firefight that lasted all day.
Wow.
And yeah, some guys can start out strong, but if some bad things start happening, it can chip away at anybody's confidence.
So, as I asked at the beginning of the question, and it was a long-winded question, but you guys are looking for that in the Q course. You guys are, and you brought up
That is the
something. Go
whole,
on. Yeah,
yep,
sorry.
that is the whole purpose of selection. Selection does a pretty good job not only testing physical endurance, but it is a mental endurance too. You get very little instructions on what to do. Uh, and of course, they're given all these tasks like create this thing to drag crates or this and that, because it's mental exercises to see how well guys can perform under pressure. So that's built in at the beginning. And then hopefully you're on a team that does good team training that's going to replicate the stressors that you'll probably expect downrange.
So, is there any mechanism or infrastructure in place for deflation? So you go and I'm just kind of contextualizing it by using this weird example, but you have all these combat experiences and this inflation of stressors, internal and stressors start to develop. I know from the beginning of the global war on terror there was no deflation mechanism. Um, you went to Army Medical or Army Psych. Um, I've known guys who went to it, and that was the end of your journey, so to speak. Now, with the long term aspect of the global war on terror, did they start to put in a deflation mechanism for you guys?
This is probably the one bitter point in my career. And
Okay.
I'll speak from my experience only up until my era when I retired in 2017. During the high times of the war on terror, no matter what SF group you're serving on, you're doing 7 to 10 months downrange, 7 to 10 months back home. And you could be doing this for years. I have 6 combat deployments in the Middle East. This is the first time it's ever been done. If you look at World War II Vietnam, you were downrange. Vietnam, you did one tour, maybe two, but you weren't on and off for years at a time. So there's SF guys out there, comrades I served with. When you add up their months in combat, total time, they've surpassed the entire length of World War II. If somebody
Jeez.
served at the beginning of Battle of World War II and was there for the signing on the battleship, I think it's a total of 42 months if you were a Marine serving
Mm-hmm.
in World War II. And you have guys with years of 7 to 10 on and off.
Wow.
And from what I've seen, SF has not done a good job. It's chewed guys up and spit them out physically and mentally. And that's where they need to step up their game. There's a whole generation of guys out there, and I know them. The Army talks about their high suicide rates of 22 a day. It's even higher in the special operations side, alcohol problems, PTSD problems, because you have guys in that cycle. I did it in fifth group. I was doing 7 on, 7 off.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for a little over 3 years, 3 tours, and then you get to third group, and you were doing 7 to 10 on and then off
Wow.
years back to back. So it's a whole new dynamic, and that's why I think we're having all these issues are so more prevalent now than when you compare them to Vietnam, World War II, Korea, because this is the first time you're asking guys to go 5, 6, 7, 8 years of this on and off, on and off.
See, it's interesting because when I was in the Navy, I told you I was on submarines. I was on boomers. So though boomers are, you probably know, but they're nuclear missile, ballistic missile cruises, and you go and you do 3 on and 3 off. You have 2 crews, a gold crew and a blue crew, and I remember coming back, and I became the senior lookout. I strive to make that watch so I could be the senior lookout for a very selfish reason, because that's the first person who cracks the hatch and goes up and breathes that briny air. Now, I know there were guys just from that, and it's stressful, but nowhere near as stressful as deployment into a combat zone. But the isolation, the nonstop, and there were programs in place to help people deflate from that. That's one place maybe the Army can look at. I know it doesn't seem like it parallels, but from a psychology perspective, maybe it does. But at least it's a place to start, right?
Yeah.
I do have to say thank you so much for being so candid about that. I really appreciate that. And the viewers, it will absolutely help. What do you think can be done? Because now I'm thinking about mindset and I'm thinking about what you said. Can that be something that's integrated into the initial train up? Psychological tool sets that can be given to new SF soldiers. Um,
There's a lot of, they are looked at the psychological level,
mhm,
and I was never a pipeline or a instructor for the Q for that part of the Q course. I did
mhm,
the advanced stuff. So there are things in play. They have psychologists that test guys and do all this stuff, and I had to go through it myself. So that's looked at to weed out, what they deem is okay, somebody not ready. The term they use out there, they call it the whole man concept.
mhm.
So you just can't excel in one area and be weak in another. To put it simply, you can't be like, oh, this guy can run like a demon. He has zero upper body strength. Well, it's the same thing with how much stress or leadership styles they have too, and that's why part of the selection process, you're going to be put in charge of an event just to see how well you manage that stress, to see if you can, task organize guys, things like that. So you are tested with that somewhat in the selection process.
But how do you think the special forces community would respond to some type of yeah, I guess it's how it would be framed, right? Some type of dealing with your inner demons, the demons that showed up on your countless deployments. How do you think that they would respond to getting help? Because I know that, no one wants to go, for me in the infantry, no one wanted to go to medical. You didn't want to be, what is it? A sick call ranger. Um,
Yeah, guys want to be on a team. They want to deploy. They want to leave their teammates, and I get it. I was in that environment. You feel like you're letting your teammates down, so you want to go, go, go. And of course, you're going to do it. You're going to do your best. That's why you went into special operations. I don't have the answer. I'm not
okay.
smart enough. I've only seen the after effects. I have, nobody escapes combat unharmed. You might make it out physically, but later down the road, if you're truly in it, we're not just talking, oh, I got a pop shot at me. The guys who are truly in it, nobody escapes unscathed mentally in some form.
All right. Again, thank you so much for the
It's
candidness
kind of a
of this.
somber ending, but yeah.
No, it's the best place to end because it's the culmination of everything. You know what I mean? We're trying to tell people with this episode what to expect, how to prepare, and you are the perfect person to do that. And you have the experience and you have the knowledge and you are an incredible communicator. So Jeff, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right, that is it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, head on over to www.sandl fit.com. Almost screwed up my own URL, and pick up some merchandise. All right, that's it. Later.